All
So
right,
what are we talking about today?
today we're talking about Blazor Hybrid apps.
Ooh.
I know.
Let's
It's as
hear it.
exciting as it sounds. Cross-platform.
Now I got to stay up and watch this?
Yeah.
Yes. You can be my audience. You can sit right in front of the camera.
I'll just stand right here.
That's fine too.
All right, take it away, sir.
Perfect.
Awesome. Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Elan Lipton, and I'm an engineer on the .NET team at Microsoft. I've been working on .NET for, gosh, almost 20 years, I would say, so since the beginning. And today I want to talk to you about one of the latest, greatest, newest things that we've got, and that's building cross-platform native applications with .NET MAUI and Blazor. Let's get started. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty technical details, let's ask a few questions. What if I told you that you can build cross-platform native applications with Blazor? Yeah, .Blazor for the web with HTML and CSS. You can build cross-platform native apps. What if I told you you could take your existing Razor class libraries, that's RCLs for short, in those apps? You've got some existing code, existing libraries, existing components. You've paid for some third-party components out there. What if I told you you could use those? What if I told you that in those apps you had full native device access from all of those platforms, and that it runs on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android? And I put a little asterisk there. I went to some site, and it said that if you take those 4 operating systems combined, that's more than 95% of the market share of devices that can run apps. That's a lot. So with Blazor, you can do all of these things, and Blazor Hybrid is how you do it. So what exactly is Blazor Hybrid? Well, it's an extension of Blazor. Blazor, you might, if you're already using it today, there's Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. Both of those are for building web applications, websites, web apps. This is a third option for writing desktop and mobile apps, but using that same Blazor technology. We do that by building on the top of .NET 6 and .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI is the cross-platform UI technology based on its predecessor in Xamarin Forms, and this builds on top of that with some new features for running Blazor. And we do that with this new BlazorWebView control, where you can point it at a Razor component that you have and place it anywhere inside your application on .NET MAUI, and we'll see how to do that in this talk. So on .NET MAUI, using XAML, this is what it might look like in your application. The first thing you have is the actual BlazorWebView control. You drop that in your XAML. You can also do it in C#. There's lots of ways to go about it. And the main thing here is you point the BlazorWebView at what Blazor component do you actually want it to run. So in this case, we have a component called main, and you define that in a Razor file. Razor files are compiled into C#, and they get compiled into DLLs. You point your BlazorWebView at it, and there you've got your HTML, your CSS, and everything around that, and the code that actually activates it and makes it real live code. So you've got your event handlers and logic and async background tasks, and so forth. Now, with Blazor Hybrid, I want to tell you one thing that you have to remember, and that's these two things, which is it runs 100% of your app natively on the device in that one process. The second thing of the one thing I want you to know is that there's no HTTP, there's no network, there's no browser sandbox. This is not just a window that's pointing at a website that's running remotely or running that website on some server locally on the machine, but somehow channeling that HTTP request through showing the HTML and CSS. It is running the code, all of your app code, locally and natively on the device. The third thing I want you to know, of the one thing I want you to know, and these are all kind of corollaries to the same thing, is that in Blazor Hybrid applications, the only thing that's webby about it is that the HTML UI is rendered into a WebView control. But all the code that runs that is running locally. That's really, really important. There's no interop that's channeling things across different processes with web servers and HTTP. You're not paying any of that overhead because there is no overhead running it this way. So with that, let's jump into a demo. And this demo will start out with .NET MAUI, with a Blazor Hybrid application. This app, I'll show you where the GitHub repo is for this later. You can get all the source code that I'm running here right now. I did the last commit, I think, a few hours ago. The first thing I want to show, I'll just run the app. Anybody who knows me knows that I am a Lego fanatic. Yeah, those the building blocks. I have a lot of Lego, and I have to keep track of it. I love keeping track of things. I love having lists, and so why not build an app for tracking all of my Lego? Well, this is it. This is the Lego brick tracker that you can download the source code to. Well, what Lego do I have? Well, fortunately, there's websites, and I'm not affiliated with this, and I don't know if I'll get in trouble for showing some random third-party website. But on this website, you can search for Lego sets, and you can download those as CSV files. So here, I'll save this list. So this is, let's see, this is, oh, that's maybe too big. Let's filter by some theme. Let's see. How about DC Comics Superheroes Lego sets? Let's download that. Save that link. So this is DC Comics. So we've downloaded that CSV file, and now in my app, I can upload that file. This is the file we just downloaded, and then we can do some analysis. So it shows some basic information here. Oh, my touchpad doesn't work. Fortunately, I have a touch screen. Oh, there we go. I can run some analysis on this. That'll tell me how many Lego pieces are in this and how much space do I need. So if you took all of this year's DC Comics superhero set, it's got about 3,800 pieces, and it'll take one average size moving box to move all those pieces. Well, that's lovely, but this is a web app, and I'm not always online. I don't have access. What if we wanted to take this Blazor web app and have a .NET MAUI version of it that could even run offline? Well, I've done that. Let's go back here into Visual Studio. And in addition to this brick site server site that I also have this brick tracker client. Let's check that out. I'll run that. And this app runs on Windows, Android, iOS, and macOS. I'll show it today on Windows and Android that I have here on my Surface Book. Let's get that running. And what we'll see here in this app is most of the UI is exactly the same because most of the UI I placed inside a Razor class library. And I referenced that same Razor class library from my Blazor web server, my Blazor server web app, and from my .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid application that runs cross-platform natively. So here is that same thing. Now, this is my app. This is an exe process that's running locally on my machine. If I unplug the network, probably something horrible happens here at the studio, so I'm not going to do that. But this runs completely offline. Now, here you see it's already detected that I downloaded that DC Comics Superheroes CSV file. But I can even download more files. So let's go here. I have here this query. This is all the Lego that I own. It's a substantial list. Let's save that here. So this is Elon's Lego sets. Don't touch. I have my Lego. My kids have their Lego. The two do not overlap. Now we go here back to my app, and we see I didn't actually refresh anything in the app because this is a native app running on my machine. It's used file system watchers to detect that this new CSV file has dropped on the disk, and it's automatically loaded it, parsed it, refreshed the UI without doing anything. You can't do certain things in web apps. If you want to add certain rich capabilities in a web app, you have to do that by bringing it local onto the machine. And with BlazorWebView for Blazor Hybrid apps, you can do that. And with .NET MAUI, you can take this exact same code, and in fact, let me show it, on Android. So I've already deployed this to my Android emulator here. So here's the .NET Brick Tracker. It's exactly the same code. Actually, I think I made one UI tweak and I didn't upload it before. So I think here I'm just going to show it to be perfectly honest. Here, there's still some unused content from the default project template. But aside from that one difference, it's exactly the same. And that's the commit I did 3 hours ago. You can check me that I'm honest. Now, on Android, we're not going to use File System Watcher because you generally don't access the file system directly. But what you can do is tweak the UI, because even though 99% of the application is exactly the same on all the platforms, you do sometimes have to do something a little bit different on each platform. And so here we can open a file, use the picker, and analyze. And here I've got a Harry Potter set of Lego collections. Again, you can run all the code is exactly the same between all the different applications. Well, what does that actually look like? Back in Visual Studio, well, this brick summary project, this is where I have my collection summary. This is a Razor class library. It's got some Razor components in it. This is why you don't use hot off the press versions of Visual Studio sometimes. And I've written these components with the foreknowledge that I want to run it on the web, I want to run it on Android, I want to run iOS. So I've designed the UI to be structured and factored and designed so that it can run on all of those platforms and all the different screen formats, screen sizes, wide screens, narrow screens, and so forth. And then here in the Brick Tracker client, all you have to do is in my main page XAML file, the same code that we saw on the slide a few moments ago, this is that BlazorWebView that, in my case, is the entire application. So that's the kind of the full screen of the content page is that BlazorWebView. And I've pointed it at my component that ultimately hosts that same UI. The one thing that is different is that inside my index.razor, which is that main page that you saw, here's where I have some conditional UI where I say, well, if I'm running on a device that doesn't support file system watchers, I might if-def some code or conditionally enable something that may or may not be available depending on where I'm running. So I have some conditional UI that says, should I show the file picker? If so, great. I have the open to file button that you would have on, let's say, Android and iOS. And further down, and this is where I have that very simple logic that just detects, what operating system am I running on? And then similarly, I have a use file watcher where on, let's say, Windows and Mac Catalyst, I can use the file system watcher, I can monitor the user's downloads, and I can automatically detect those and load those files. So anytime there's a change in the file system in the user's downloads folder, I can load that, I can detect the CSV file with all the Lego set information, parse it, load it, render the UI, all using Blazor. And that's the same component that I use on the web app as well. Okay. Now, they gave us these slide templates that have all, 20 or 30 little .NET bots. That's the, I guess, official, unofficial logo. And I saw this .NET bot in the slide template that they gave us, and that's what I looked like when I was done building this demo, because it was so easy to just kind of put all these things together and just get it running on .NET MAUI and on Android and iOS and Mac Catalyst and building the web app that I just sat down, relaxed, enjoyed the evening, and you can see what time the commits are. They're usually at night because, kids playing with their Lego, not my Lego. And really with Blazor Hybrid, I think it represents what I think of as some of the Blazor values. You can use Visual Studio to develop your app. You got all your refactoring and your tools and IntelliSense and project templates, all that stuff that Visual Studio brings you. The debugger. You get to use and reuse C# and .NET, and that's kind of two different things. You get to use C# when you're writing new code, but I really want to emphasize that you can reuse a lot of the stuff. This is if you have a .NET standard library or a .NET 6.0 library or NuGet package, things like that. You can reuse all of those things in here. And that's great to kind of get you up and running, especially if you've already invested in building Blazor web apps, and I'll show more about that. You can get up and running really, really quickly by using, without any changes, those existing libraries that you have. And the same thing goes for HTML and CSS. If you already know HTML, you know CSS, if you've built assets, every time I start a project, I just go to my previous project, I copy paste all that CSS because I know I've got some good styles in there. I know I've got some good markup. That's the table style that I like. I just copy paste it in, build the next app. And then on top of that, a rich control ecosystem. There are tons of third-party vendors out there. There's a bunch of stuff built into Blazor, but there's a bunch of NuGet packages out there, many freed. There's many free ones, many that are paid and really good value for building really beautiful-looking applications that have amazing functionality. Now, when you're going to build a Blazor Hybrid app, there's a few different ways I think about that. One, which I just showed, is I built a brand new app from scratch. I know and I'm planning to build my Razor class libraries so that they can be used on all these different platforms, on the web, on different native devices, small screens, large screens, and so forth. That's one way. But for a lot of cases, you might already have some existing Blazor web app, and you could potentially even host that entire Blazor web app, all the pages, all the content, all the navigation, all the functionality, and just drop it into a native app. And that's what we'll see in the next demo. And then the last thing is you might have some existing purely native app that you want to modernize with some web content or reuse little bits or little islands of Blazor throughout that application. And what you could then do is, even if you're modernizing an application, you might start out with a small island, a little rectangle of the screen. You might drop in some Blazor components in there to add some new feature. Maybe you found some cool Blazor component that you want to host inside there. Maybe that rectangle kind of grows over time. Maybe you've built a WinForms or WPF application, runs on Windows only, of course, and you start adding new UI with Blazor, and maybe that rectangle grows. Maybe it grows until it's the full screen. And now that you've got basically the whole UI built using Blazor and web and HTML and CSS, well, now you can drop it in a .NET MAUI application. Now it can run on Android. Now you could run it in Blazor WebAssembly on the web. And this enables you to do all those things. So you have this pattern here. It takes work, but it's something that you could approach incrementally without necessarily paying a huge cost to get started. So that second case, which is, what if I have an existing Blazor web app and I want to add a native experience for it? Well, in the keynote that was earlier today or yesterday, I have no idea what day it is, but that's okay, because a lot of you can watch this online later. In the keynote for .NET Conf, they showed a .NET podcast app. So I've got that here, in one of my Visual Studios. And let me run that application. This is the same app that you saw with the same functionality. It's got a list of podcasts. You can listen. They added a listen together feature to that app. And this is hosted inside .NET MAUI. So here we have the .NET MAUI. It's the same app that you've seen. You can play a podcast and listen to it. There's a lot of great content here for .NET. And what they showed, I believe, in the keynote was they added this listen together feature, and then just this rectangle here, just this one island of Blazor, was hosted inside of BlazorWebView. But what if you wanted to go further? What if you didn't want to build two different versions of the app? Well, that's actually what this app is. I didn't tell you that, but this is all one big BlazorWebView. What this app is essentially an almost empty .NET MAUI application, and they pointed the BlazorWebView at the entire web app. So it's compiled in here. It's all running locally, natively on the device. Again, just the HTML is being rendered into a web view. But all the same stuff works. I could listen to these podcasts, hit play. You can do all the listen together. Everything works. I can switch. There's features here. I can switch to dark mode if I want. That all works great. Now, that's kind of neat because I can take that existing web app and have a native experience. But what I really want to do is add uniquely native experiences to that app. And that's what I've done here. So let's take a look at that in Visual Studio as well. So here in the, oh, actually, let me run it one more time. Actually, I can just run it from the Start menu. Where is it? .NET Podcast. I can't find it. I'll just run it from here. So while that is loading, I added some functionality that is uniquely native, which is to track your local storage on the device. Podcasts, if you download them, takes up a lot of space. So I added here this little storage indicator here that is looking at the local hard drive. It's looking at my C drive on Windows, and it's saying like, oh gosh, you've got only about 600 gigs free. Maybe you want to make more space. So there's a make more space button there. Let's take a look at what that does. So in the pages, and this pages project is this exact same content. This is where all the content of the web app actually lives. In the nav menu component, I added this storage service, which down here at the bottom, and I'll kind of, maybe I can do it a little bit kind of side by side. So this little storage little thing here, I had to check that if the storage service is available, which it's not available when running on the web because it's not your storage, it's wherever it's running on Azure in the cloud. But if I'm running locally, it'll show this progress bar that shows how much storage is used out of your storage total. And then I have a button here that calls the make more space method that is implemented on a per platform basis. And now I've only implemented that service on the MAUI project. So here in the MAUI project, in the MAUI program, scroll down just a bit, I register a service. This is the entry point of the .NET MAUI application. I've got an implementation of this new storage service interface that I've defined. And the implementation is right here, where does some pretty trivial thing. It just gets the first hard drive that's on the system, gets some basic information about it, what's the size of the drive, how much free space is there, and so forth. And then the last thing here is this make more space method. Now, what does that do? How do you make a lot of space on a hard drive? Well, there's this one trick that hard drive manufacturers don't want you to know, and that's, hey, just format the hard drive, make a lot of space. So I only have that on Windows. If I wanted to do something on Android, you might pop up the storage settings app in Android. But on Windows, let's just format the hard drive. So if I hit show more space, make more space here, that's going to format my hard drive. So let's press that. And well, unfortunately, Windows won't let me do that because this is my C drive is where I installed Windows. So I can't actually format the hard drive. But this really is the actual format hard drive UI that I am calling. I am doing a Win32 pinvoke. This is the same thing you can call from C code or C++ code. Of course, you can do it from C#. You can do it from a Blazor desktop application as well. It's just C# code running on Windows. You might, like I said, call a different API on each platform, but this is the real code that you have, that you can run. So you can take your web app and conditionally add some logic that's available on only certain platforms when running natively or locally. And now I think we got time for one more demo. Now, what if I've got some existing application? Maybe I wrote it using WinForms or WPF. It's an app. The previous session that you could watch was about migrating. We talked about migrating WinForms applications to bring them up to .NET 6. Now, let's say you've got that, and now you're running on .NET 6. That's great. And one thing you could do to it is drop a WinForms Blazor WebView. We run on .NET MAUI and WinForms and WPF. We have a Blazor WebView control for each of those, and start adding some richness to your application. So back in this brick tracker solution, I've got my WinForms project here. This is a .NET 6 WinForms project. And this looks like basically any WinForms project you've probably ever seen. It's gray with 3 more shades of gray on it. It's kind of your standard kind of Win32, not necessarily the most visually appealing application, but hey, we all use these in our works and our jobs and our lives. And anytime I need to just whip a quick app together, I just go to WinForms. I've been using it for 20 years. It's wonderful. But let's say I want to add some richness to it. Well, what I've done here is on this analysis tab, this app, by the way, does absolutely nothing. It's just a little shell of an application. On this analysis tab, I've added a Blazor WebView control. Let me show the code for that. So here on my form1.cs, when the form starts up, I create my Blazor WebView. You can do this in the designer as well. The build that I have, there was a bug that I just fixed, but it wasn't available in this build where it doesn't work in the designer. But you can drag and drop in the designer, set all the options. Just like we saw in the XAML example before, I pointed at my Blazor component. So in this case, I have a brick analysis Razor component that in this case is sitting in exactly the same project. So I've got this just one Blazor component sitting here. It's a .razor file. Now to build this, if we take a look at what the UI looks like, it's got a clock, and it's actually a ticking clock. I don't know what it's ticking to. I think that's just the current time, and it's not saying how much time I have left, because I don't know, that'll be interesting. And it's got some rich UI. Now, I didn't actually build this UI. I want to tell you what I did. Last night, when I was finishing up this demo, I need to figure out what am I actually going to put for the content for this. And so I went to Bing, and I typed free Blazor components. And I clicked on the first link, and it was the Radzin Blazor components. And all I did is follow their tutorial. Now, I'm not super familiar with the Radzin Blazor components, but I don't think they did anything special for Blazor Desktop. And I don't think they need to, at least not in most cases. Why? Well, it's just hosting those same Blazor components. As long as they render CSS and do some JS interop to some JavaScript and interact with HTML and the DOM, they don't need to do anything special. So I literally followed their getting started tutorial about how to add a reference. You add a reference to the NuGet package, you add a reference to the JavaScript, you add a reference to the CSS, you import a couple namespaces, and then this is exactly the code I did not change. I think I unindented it is the only thing that I changed in the code. This is exactly their sample code, all of this code. I didn't change anything. Maybe I switched spaces to tabs, I'm not sure, but nothing changed. And it worked exactly on the first try. So if you want to add, let's say, a clock, for example, to your WinForms application, or there's some other components that you've written, or there's a vendor out there who's written, or you bring somebody in your team who's a Blazor expert and you want them to add a new feature, you can do that. It's super easy. It's literally maybe 10 lines of code to add a Blazor WebView to an existing WinForms application running on .NET 6. And then it's just another few lines to add a reference to your Blazor component. And you're off to the races. So what are some of the benefits that we saw? You can reuse your web development skills. So if you know HTML and you know CSS, you know how to use Blazor, and your code. You already have a lot of assets that you've built over the years. You can use that. You get all the native device capabilities. I know I always show how to format the hard drive, but that's just the killer proof that I have native access. But we also saw file system watchers and other disk capabilities that are not available on the web. You can mix native and web UI in WPF, in WinForms, and in .NET MAUI across all the platforms. And ultimately, the thing we all want is reduce app development time. It did not take me a long time to make these demos. I know I didn't spend a lot on the styling, but the code did not take very long to write. So in summary, you can choose building web or native or hybrid, all using that same Blazor, the same exact Blazor running on all of those. To reach cross-platform, you got .NET MAUI running on Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows. If you've got your existing applications, those battleship gray WinForms applications, drop a BlazorWebView in there, modernize it, add some new features. You can get the previews of all this in the Visual Studio previews, release Q2 of next year. And then lastly, you can hear the links. All the Blazor Hybrid stuff is on the .NET/MAUI repo, and the demo code is right here on my GitHub. Please check that out. Thank you very much.
Elon, that was amazing. Congratulations. So many demos packed into such a small time.
Yeah, I'm an engineer, and so I get the slides out of the way, and then just code.
That's what we all like to see anyway. So we do have a couple questions. I'll move through them quickly. Will there be a project template in multi-mode Blazor app? WebAssembly, server, hybrid?
We've been considering, should we do a project template like that? I don't know if I would necessarily do Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly, but certainly, let's say Blazor WebAssembly with Blazor Desktop or Blazor Server with Blazor Desktop. We've thought about it. It's a balance between cluttering the File New Project dialog, which it's got, I don't know, hundreds of templates in there. So we're not against the idea. We just want to make sure we can do it right. So maybe it's the same project template with an option or something like that. We just don't want to. We want to avoid clutter with the less is more pattern. It is not hard to start without it. You can just create a .NET MAUI Blazor application, and then just add a Razor class library, add a reference. It is 2 more steps, but we're thinking about it. It is a perfectly reasonable idea.
Yeah, okay, so maybe in the works.
Absolutely.
Fernando asks, I think it says, is there a way to use .NET MAUI components along with BlazorWebView?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely 100% yes. The BlazorWebView is a MAUI control. We have a WinForms, a WPF, and a MAUI control. You can mix and match that wherever you want. So if you want the BlazorWebView just to show up on one page or just take up half of the screen, you can do that and have all the rest be native MAUI elements, the buttons, labels, shell, all of those things. It's just a .NET MAUI control. It's not special in that respect, so you can mix it however you want.
Okay, so based on preferences and flexibility on their own design.
Yep, it just depends on the app that you're building. You can start out with a small BlazorWebView and then have it take over your app, or you can just put it for one piece of functionality. Maybe you have some feature on your web app that you want to just quickly bring in, and that's what they showed at the keynote. Hey, we've got this feature we just finished building for the web app. You have literally 5 minutes to get it into your .NET MAUI app, and you could do it in 5 minutes. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. Okay, we have time for one more quick question. This may not be quick, but you mentioned on the Blazor value slide, develop with Visual Studio. Are there any limitations with using Visual Studio Code?
I have used Visual Studio Code with .NET MAUI and Blazor. I mostly use Visual Studio in my day job. It just has the features that I need, that I like. I know a lot of things do work in VS Code. I think there are some current limitations, I don't remember what they are, where some scenarios don't work well from the command line, which is the Visual Studio Code. When it runs your app, it goes through a different process compared to Visual Studio for Windows or Visual Studio Mac. By the way, Visual Studio Mac does also work. So there are some limitations right now that we're working out, but a lot of things do just work in VS Code. You can run your app if you have VS Code on a Mac, you can run your iOS app. It launches the simulator, and you can run your iOS app or Mac Catalyst. And I believe it works on Windows as well, but I'm not as sure.
Okay. All right. Seems like there's a lot of opportunity here.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Elon. I am so excited about the future of hybrid apps with MAUI and Blazor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.